We're back. I think I did lighting in a hurry tonight, so it's like still half unlit. This is Youth Lagoon, Daydream, from the album The Year of Hibernation. Love it. It's so funny because this new interface, you can't tell what's going on. They updated the interface for going live, like today. Well, apparently it's working. Very strange. Anyway. There we go. Same thing as last week, just happening tonight. Welcome back. We're here. We're just gonna hang out, listen to music. What's happening? Don't forget to turn your... It's right here. I know I posted about this late. Well, we're just going to talk. We're going to hang out. So if you're seeing this later, we had a good time, no matter what. So, I don't know about all, but all the different red stuff happening. And it's been a pretty interesting moment, I think, for not just socialism, but I think a sort of like push toward egalitarian help in a crisis. Like, there's just like the people are really trying to do it. They're trying to have this argument about whether rent should be due. And the landlords are like, no, you got to pay us. So the landlords and the tenants are all fighting each other online now. It's been fascinating to watch. Like all these accusations of like, oh, you're a bad person. There's like very little subtlety to the whole discussion, which I find interesting because, well, that's just what it means to be human. Everybody's struggling and trying to figure out a way to get by. And in the meantime, the economics, the gears of the economics around us keep grinding. And it's just funny sort of faith still in the markets to deal with the crisis. Just flood the market. I love this slush fund, this idea, this corporate slush fund. Like, what is it, $1 trillion? Oh my God. That's so much money. And it's just like, here you go. Profit people, come and get it. Hotels, Trump hotels. I mean, so I guess that's one silver lining is like Trump hotels can't get it. I'm okay with that. So yeah, my son's over in tonight too, so I might get interrupted whenever, which is okay. I don't know about y'all, but I've been spending my time indoors, painting, drawing, doing not much. I mean, the doing that much side of things, that's great. I like it too. I'm so curious about this new interface. Oh, I don't know what's going on. It seems like it's working. I just want to check online. I don't know what's going on. It seems like it's working. I just want to check online. Yeah, it's strange. It's like now I can see who's what, how many people are watching it. There. It says like 3 people. But I can't tell anything on this screen now. They like changed everything in a week. Probably because everybody was like doing live broadcasts and they wanted to like make it fancier and like more efficient, easier for people to do, or whatever, streamline it. So I don't know. I don't know who's watching, but I'll put the call-in number out there. 312-841-1186. If anyone wants to dial up, we've got you here. We can talk about the issues of the day. We talk about nothing. We can just kibitz. But yeah, feel free to call in anytime. Otherwise, I'm just going to pontificate. Check my own Facebook photos occasionally. It's awful. Society has produced me. So I did have a few thoughts before tonight's show. I was like, finishing up the dinner that sucked. I was trying to make a good dinner, and it was like, put this pasta thing together with chicken. And I bought this Campbell's, what was it called? Marsala sauce. Hated it. Kids are like, they'll stare at the food. So this is like the journey to learning how to make a couple dishes. You occasionally try some little extra thing or the other. So you can come up with like one other dish you can make, right? Because you only know how to make like 3 or 4 dishes, whatever it is. Like I can make a good shepherd's pie. I can make chicken marsala straight up, not the Campbell's version, apparently. Spaghetti. So, oh my God, here we go. Like telling you about my cooking. None of you should have to hear about my cooking. I'm sorry. But yeah, so to go back to the thought that I had prior was, there's this whole, oh my God, Charlie Chaser history now with this photo, right? So I'll give him another one. I'll post this in the comments. Oh, I need a photo here. Let's see. Oh, well, maybe it won't let me. They just changed the system up, and now it all is like messed up. Oh, what the hell? Yeah, there's no way to understand what's going on here. This interface is like completely new. Anyway, I'll post it in the comments later, but where did I put it? Sound like so confused. See my boxer shorts? That's all I'm wearing. This is the photo of me as well when I was a kid. It's probably the first kiss. Yeah, cute. Wearing white pants. This cute girl in the dress gives me a kiss on the cheek. I mean, again, John Oliver. To beat that dead horse to death again. We'll post that one next week. I also found this picture of Jay Nemi, which, he called in last week. I had to dig this out. Gotta scan this one in. You can see it. There he is, smiling. Look at it. Oh, spilling beer. So I haven't scanned this one in yet, but look at that guy. Handsome guy. Oh. Apparently, if I hold up too close to the camera, it cuts off. Technology. Yeah, look, see, it's still working on my phone. Oh, this is terrible. It's hard to tell what's even going on. This is the episode where I'm like completely befuddled. Great. Well, we're here. We're still doing it. We're having conversations. This might be the episode where nobody calls in. Here's another one of me and Jay. It's David Churros. Oh, that guy. That guy is David Churros. This is when we were having a kegger at my house. I think I was like 22 or something like that. 24. Nice apartment then too. I like having nice apartments. I like to work around the house, clean things up. Generally maintain. So I'm going to put the call-in number in the comments. Apparently I can still do that. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Bill Pessler. Wide open. Call in. Get that call. I don't know why they would turn off so you can't post a photo. Sometimes I think about engineers and I'm like, no, it's terrible. Got to figure it out, make it smooth, make it work across platforms. I'm going to start complaining about different types of charging units next. Like, oh, why do they have to change the charger with every phone? So you have to buy the whole thing all over again, right? I'm like, can't you just make the same charge, from each different company? I get it, they're competing, whatever, but can we just agree on a universal charger cord? Let everybody take a piece of it. It makes things that are charged from it. Oh, caller coming in. Hold on, we're gonna. Ooh, lost you. I'm gonna call you back. I only get this caller tonight. Let's see if we can get this to work. Yeah, here we go. Calling you back.
That works too.
You are on the Charlie Chaser Show. Welcome.
Hello.
Jill.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. What's the topic at hand so far since I couldn't watch live?
Oh yeah. Well, I opened up talking about the red stuff in the city.
Okay.
And since then I've been complaining about the new interface because apparently it seems like because everybody's doing live stuff on Facebook now, they may have tried to like gussy up their interface, and it totally is screwed up now. It's like you can't.
Yeah, upgrades.
Yeah, upgrades tend to go wrong initially. So
They'll sort it out
or not, and we'll just have to keep doing it. Yeah. How are you doing?
Doing just fine.
Yeah. This is
Low-key.
This is day what of your quarantine? We were talking earlier, just so the audience can get a sense of this. Like, year 0 quarantine, like not having contact with people as much as possible.
I mean, it's not 0-0 if
right, of course.
Because that's not possible, right?
Right.
But it's pretty darn close. I'm just trying to keep myself out of the possible mix of parameters that could transmit things as much as possible.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So,
whatever that.
Yeah, audience doesn't know, but that
right.
was a huge adjustment for me since I already worked from home. Although I do feel the difference.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's there's an interesting discussion there about how it affects people across the various strata of. Initially my thing was like, yeah, you can shoot me into space. I'm used to being in the studio or writing alone or whatever. But there's a lot of people who socialize every day and get out, and that's their interaction is their job. And I think that there's a lot of sort of reactions across the different sort of strata that are interesting.
Sure. And I can really sympathize with, people who are trying to make this adjustment on the fly,
Yeah.
who haven't done this before. I mean, the times when things like this get to me, it's an intense type of internal tension and agitation, that cabin fever type of feeling. I know the feeling. I just am so used to it at this point. That strategies in place. But man, if I was just thrown into this with no pre-existing strategies, that'd be rough.
It can make you stir crazy. Yeah, totally. Cabin fever stuff. Yeah, exactly. I think that my reaction to this has been, at least in the first week, was to like sleep a lot. And then you get bored with sleeping all the time, and you're like, well, what do I do now? And you can't. I think especially initially, because it's like I can't work either. I can't do all these other things. So what do you do in place of all that? And that adjustment's sort of difficult all around. But I don't know. So I look at this whole rent thing, and there's a real divide forming. Between landlords and tenants. And now the Chicago Teachers Union has endorsed a rent freeze, which it's a big union in Chicago, and it's got a lot of sway. And I think if they're endorsing it, that was like an hour ago that happened. I don't know. I'm very curious. Do you think there'll be a rent freeze? Do you think people they'll take care of mortgages and rents and just hold off for the month? Is that possible?
I think they're going to have to intervene on some level. Like they're going to just like telling people to stay home and not go to work, and do what you can from home, even if your job was something, pretty hands-on.
Right.
Because what's the flip side? A whole bunch of people evicted onto the streets. I don't know how that works at all.
Well, I suppose if you're being sort of cynical about it and waiting to see how it all shakes out and whatever, you can sort of be like, okay, having been through an eviction process at one point, which didn't, I left before it happened, but they give you, it's about 3 months to get into the court docket. So you've got like all this time. Because your case can't get brought up right away. So I think,
sure, that makes sense.
They're probably going to be sitting on it for a little while if it does get put into an eviction. But the problem is, once you start an eviction process, it's in the court. And you can't just take it back if you're using it as a pressure tactic, right? Then you're following it through, and maybe you have some agreement, but it comes up in court. I guess you could just skip the court date. I don't know. I'm just thinking through the logistics of all this, and like, if you're the mayor, why are you only giving 2,000 people grants? I think.
Yeah. As soon as you said, like, it's a process, of course, that takes that amount of time. I have that somewhere in my brain. I know that it takes. I don't know how much time, but like I know it takes time. But if the time frame is 3 months, could we be past this in 3 months? Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's possible. In my mind, it's equally as possible that 3 months is not going to cut it for this size of the country and the spread that we're talking about.
Right.
Right. I don't know. We're obviously watching.
To try and be realistic about it, right? And go, okay, what is leadership thinking? And like, where are the safety nets? Where can they put them reasonably to sort of not create a class war that sparks into violence? Which we've also talked about. It's like, stress violence or whatever kind of violence breaking out isn't going to help anything. It's going to make matters worse.
Exactly. Like, even if it's not, a whole bunch of people and their belongings literally on the sidewalk, it's still just incredible amount of tension added, to the system.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you said at one point, that, the priority should just be making sure everybody has housing. Right. And you can worry about the banking stuff and but just not throw everybody out on the street. I thought that was the best metric I'd heard of put toward it so far. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been some memes going around and whatnot, but it's crazy to me personally, how, things are being written up as bailouts, including corporations. Not that I think that businesses don't need help, but I just don't understand, in this situation, like, we need the individuals, the people to be okay.
Right.
Can't we deal with the businesses and the banks next step? We need people to be okay immediately.
Right. Yes. The infrastructure is used to taking care of itself. The bureaucracy is used to, figuring its way out of problems and situations that have damaged it. But I think families don't recover. Like there's a real long-term damage there in terms of, psychological trauma to everybody involved.
Yeah, and talking about the economy this goes without saying, but talking about the economy needing, right, more than the people,
right?
Us to get back to work is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. How in the world would the economy be okay if people are dead or dying, or immediate people who are dead or dying? Like, how does that make for an okay economy? So it's got to be this mental shift to the individuals and people first, which...
Right. And I think that's the long-term goal here. And I think a lot of activists who are working on that stuff now are sort of, even if this doesn't necessarily happen in the first instance, or the second instance, but you have a rent freeze as a longer-term goal, and then you're preparing the system. Because it seems to me that our government has learned some of the lessons of 9/11 and the market crash, that happened around the Great Recession, that, there was no Main Street bailout then. And this time they've made sure to include it. Not only to include it, this is something I find, interesting. There's a sort of learning curve here. The progressivism is still sort of happening within the government. Insofar as, they're including gig workers now in the unemployment insurance, which wasn't a part of it before. And I think a huge sector of the population was like, look, this is how I make my living, and I don't deserve to get helped out too. So, I do think that they learned that a little bit from the Great Recession and the mortgage crisis. But now, we're sort of looking at other tiers of it. So if we can get to the point where we freeze the economy, we just hold it in time and place, and say, okay, this is an economic crisis that's happening to everyone.
Yeah, and this is a life crisis that's happening to everyone. And there need to be large mental shifts that are going to happen to deal with this as it unfolds. And some of those, in the long term, may be very good shifts, mental shifts. But it's going to be a hard process.
It's a hard process. I mean, this is what I'm saying. I'm seeing on the comments already is that there's just like a fighting attitude between the tenants and the landlords. And that's just one sector where it's really coming to a head, obviously. But you're looking at healthcare. You're looking at climate crisis, the climate change crisis, which you were bringing up in our last conversation too, where it's like, we're going to get into like monsoon season or tsunami or hurricane season or whatever, and there's going to be like that whole added layer of disease vector playing out, and then you get into the next year. I mean, we could have panic scenarios, but.
Yeah, I did read, I can't remember the source, unfortunately. I really prefer to only talk with confidence about what the source is.
Right. No
but
disinformation.
At least for the sake of the thought process, reading about, of course, some of this hitting the South and the poor in the South more significantly. And again, how that overlays with hurricane season if this goes all the way through.
Well, we're looking at New Orleans.
To the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. So, crisis quarantine it just continues, it seems, then indefinitely.
Yeah. The sooner we can all just stay as close to zero contact as possible.
Hold on, I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second.
Yeah.
We got another call real quick. Hello, you're on the Charlie Chaser Show.
Hey, it's Amy Garrett. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Okay.
Thanks for calling. I'm gonna let Jill go on the other line and come back to you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Actually, I'll merge the calls. We can do that apparently. Okay.
You guys were talking about rents and stuff, right? Uh-huh.
Yeah. So now I've just merged the call, Jill. So this is Amy on the line with us, talking about rent.
I was going to say that the reason that they're paying attention to gig workers and that sort of thing has really nothing to do with the last recession. It has to do with it being an election year and having the two really dominant candidates who are progressives. And the amount of delegates that both of them got together, and the amount of power they have within the Democratic Party, even though Sanders is not Democrat, nevertheless, the amount of power they have within the party means that the rest of the Democrats have to pay attention to them when it comes to creating the Democratic platform that will come out of the convention.
Right. And Bernie has endorsed a rent freeze, I think, too, right?
Right. Yes, but that's and of course Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a very eloquent voice, but it's really not that. It's that they have to go to the base of the Democratic Party, which is us. When they create this platform. And had we not had such a powerful vote in 2018, and had we not created these candidates that ran now, it just wouldn't be happening.
Right. Yeah. It's a great argument. Without Yang, would we have had that direct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yang too. And
it's a great example.
Yang is the last person I'd call a progressive, but still.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's a bro, right? I think that's how people talk about him a lot. I don't actually follow Yang that close. I like that idea he was putting out, but
Yeah, I saw an article that said, turns out Yang was right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're not doing it every month, at least for 4 months, I guess.
Yeah. But also they're also shamed by the memes that show what the rest of the world is doing. And you can say, okay, England's a much smaller country, and Canada's pretty big, and Germany is huge. So,
are you talking about in terms of universal basic?
Compared to the United States, what the other countries are doing. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that I was listening to an NPR show the other day when they were saying that Germany's allows crowd gatherings now, and like they just did a great job containment.
Yeah.
And so
it'll come back. It'll come back. It's gonna come back.
For sure. Yeah.
Come back everywhere. But as long as they learn their lessons and, start tracing right away when it comes back, that sort of stuff.
Well, that's what we're all hoping, right? I think
Yeah.
this is an extraordinary circumstance brought on by a complex nexus of bad politics, lack of leadership,
But it's actually
a new virus.
fucking simple.
Yes.
It wasn't contained in China. It came over here and it was fairly containable. And nobody did anything about it. Turns out there's a 69-page coronavirus, or not corona, but pandemic outline that was left by the
Obama.
pandemic office.
Yeah.
Obama. Yeah. And it was basically a 1-2, do this, then this, then this, then this.
Right.
And they ignored it all. So it all could have been prevented.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've heard too. That I think it's true that we've lived under a lot of other sort of pandemic threats that we've been able to ignore mostly.
Well, actually,
because of the good defenses we had.
Ebola. They were on Ebola from the time it left Africa and landed, I think, in New Orleans.
Yeah, right.
And they had 2 victims here. I think 1 lived. But 2 people that got Ebola here, 1 died, I think.
Awful.
And they traced that person and got the second person. And then they had 2 in Africa.
Right.
4 Americans. And that's it. That was it. Without that, without jumping on it, and without knowing of it in Africa, even before, they could jump on it, it would have blown up like this. Ebola has a very, very low transmission compared to this situation. Yeah.
Jill, you have some medical background too, so I just want to put that out there for folks that you might understand this.
It's obviously a big factor in this. This sucker's got a bunch of things going for it that is especially dangerous. Right. Yeah. And people hear the word Ebola and get real nervous, and it's amazing how blasé people have been because of misinformation.
Right.
And the way things have been handled with this. And, Ebola is much more creepy to think about, but it's was also much more transmissible in Africa because of the way they buried dead and all of that.
Yeah, I understand. You had to be in direct physical contact with someone in full blown out symptoms.
Yeah, with someone who's ill and showing signs.
Right, as opposed to the COVID, which can be invisible and transmittable.
And I have a whole other topic that I've started to read about, and because of my age, I'm more attuned to, and that is that this, to me, now that I'm hearing people die, and people that I know of, and I have a friend who had someone die, one of her friends died, so it's getting closer, and it feels like AIDS, and this is what happened when AIDS hit in the 80s.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly on the last show. Yeah,
most of us barely used condoms.
Yes. Right. That was a whole thing.
It was not only did you have to learn a habit like that, but you had to learn how to talk to your partner about that before you had sex.
Right.
People needed to learn how to behave. People were afraid of, anything, saliva, airborne, they didn't know. Oh,
right.
Yeah, there was this one, I remember this one morning, no deep kissing. Oh, what the fuck?
What's the measure?
Yeah. Can you please just tell us what that means? Yeah.
Yeah, funny.
Yeah. And it was easier at that time to just vilify a population, which again is a form of misinformation. Well, they did. They didn't realize that a lot of gay men were married. So, there was that. And then it started to go to women, and so on. But Reagan ignored it wouldn't say the word for 4 years.
Well, It's just he was a homophobe. He was a homophobe, and that's I think pretty well documented.
No, he had been in Hollywood. He couldn't be in Hollywood if you're homophobe. He just didn't connect with that. There weren't a lot of men that were out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you were not allowed to be out at the time.
I remember the drama around Rock Hudson coming out. Right. I mean,
yes.
That was like a Hollywood, main guy, and it was
he had to come out and say he was dying, all in the same press conference. Yeah.
That's crazy.
If it hadn't been for Doris Day, who did not have to do that.
Yeah.
She stood by and basically she was his rock. I mean, she was incredible, even at the time.
Yeah.
She was incredible. Yeah. And it started the whole movement of outing yourself, of becoming out.
Huh.
It really
yes.
Be
yes.
gay.
I think that
This was the only way they could survive.
Well, that was the whole silence equals death movement too. Just that because we're invisible, we can be slaughtered without second thought.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also making them an other. So if you make it like a homosexual disease, or you make it a Chinese disease, right? You can say, well, it's not me, it's not my problem, right? There is that information. But what I'm saying is, the reason it feels like AIDS is the grief is very similar.
Well, I also my just to interject this real quick, my cousin's husband, Shane Simmons, who's on this, we'll probably see this, he was posting recently that, part of the reason they excluded men who hadn't paid child support from the stimulus package, the only group, I found it weird, but he was suggesting they were targeting the poor. And that was a signal that they wanted to include in the bill. That the messaging was, if you're poor and you're not supporting your family, right, especially if you're male, we're going to make an example of you. But we also are after all the rest of you too, right? Your family, you have to be family values. You have to agree to, So I think I look at that and I'm like, how do you reconcile that perspective with what the bill is supposed to be about, which is helping everyone? It's politicizing it still. Yeah.
To get anything done, you have to give and take. And
right.
What the Democrats know is what they're facing it straight on. When the Republicans are not facing it straight on. The Republicans still, literally now, do not have the information. They can't compute it, it doesn't make sense to them, and they won't listen to the truth. And so
right.
They just don't have the information, so they can't see in the future. The Democrats, however, can see the future, and they know that there will have to be more bills to be put together. So they got started.
Right, I've heard that. There's at least a couple coming, or at least one coming. That's what I've heard. Yeah, and meanwhile, meanwhile, there's some very immediate things happening for people on the ground, right? Like where they're facing evictions and they're facing, if you listen to it earlier in the show, we were talking about this, because if you get on the rolls and you're in the court system, those evictions are in process. I guess you can just drop them, but
Well, you know what? There are just too many people for the eviction courts to actually work properly in the next few months. Yeah, there's that.
They'll probably get overloaded.
My mortgage company sent me a letter that said, as I was calling them to say, well, I'm not going to be able to pay this month. And, they sent me a letter and said, you don't have to pay us at least for this month.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't forgive the debt. They just said it doesn't have to be paid now. And they also said we will not report it to credit companies.
Right.
And so
one of our That's okay. One of our questions. I want to talk about who think COVID is a hoax. Is that still a thing? Is it still a thing out there that people don't believe that?
Yes, all over the South. Yes. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people who don't believe it, right?
Yeah, I don't think we've solved that problem completely yet. No, not until they see their neighbors die. Right.
Yeah, it's as visceral as all that, isn't it? It's like you need to know somebody who's died and feel it creep up on you. Like that's where people are comfortable letting it stand these days, is getting within 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And, that's not where you want a deadly pandemic to trigger resources at. You want that line a little further back than Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah, and that also happened during AIDS. Basically,
yeah.
Until it went out to the general population, everyone said, well, it can't happen to us. Yeah.
Right.
Psychological defenses. I mean, people are built that way, until it's right in your face. We have the ability to think beyond that, but many of us,
don't
feel better or not. So
yeah, I mean, we've talked to some. I came out of Indiana, so I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we talk about Amber Drea here commenting on people who live in rural communities won't know it's there until it's affected everyone. And that's maybe sort of a thing, right? It's the frog in hot water. You start to, you're sitting there and it's like, oh wow, why is it bubbling over there?
Here's the thing: someone is dying in New York City right now.
Yeah, I heard that. That's awful.
And that's in New York City with very advanced hospitals, and the same is true for Chicago. And we even have Rush, which has been planning for an epidemic for, 3 or 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And so we're, compared to other cities, we're very prepared. But in the South, there are a lot of counties that don't even have a hospital.
Well, I mean, you remember Katrina when they had everybody go to the stadium, and it was just like a refugee camp of flatbeds and blankets, and people piled in together. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of undeveloped areas of the country that are going to really suffer.
Component. Like, there's no way around it because it's vital function. There's just no way around. If you need a ventilator, you need a ventilator. It's not like you need just a space, like a bed and the right medication. Specialized piece of equipment. These counties don't have it. They just don't have it. They don't have the equipment, and they don't have hospitals. Hospitals have been closing across the South for years.
Let me ask you guys. So I've got a couple of people on the line at once. It's an opportunity here. What do you feel about how things are right now, and with the responses that have been given? Yeah, I think we're sort of contextualizing all this for ourselves, and we understand sort of where it's coming from. And knowing all that, how do you feel about your safety right now and the outcome of that safety?
I have I have the gift of history, of years, but I think, most of us are going to be okay. I think it's a matter of just sort of girding ourselves and living through it.
Yeah. I mean, AIDS, what was 86,000 deaths? Is that the number?
I don't even know. Yeah.
I don't even know. I'll have to check that, but I think that I read somewhere earlier.
Yeah.
I would think it sounds low.
Yeah. Even if the majority of us will be okay, the majority of us will also suffer losses in some way, shape, or form.
Correct. It's not just about the individual deaths. Yeah, exactly.
Everybody will know somebody. Exactly.
Right.
At least everybody will know somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I wanted to bring up, but I got to know if I've got it handy. Oh yeah, I do actually. This was my Uncle Mark, who died of AIDS. He was one of the early AIDS victims, and it was a very interesting moment living through this, because this is a guy who I would sleep in my grandparents' house in his bed with him, and we were very close. I was very young. I was like 5 years old or so, but he passed, and I tell the story occasionally. Um, my dad and grandfather and everybody went out and got his body from New York where he was living, and they brought him back. And so they at least did that, but then nobody would pitch in for a gravestone. So it was just one of these things, because he had been ostracized by the family for being gay.
Yeah.
Then he came back to visit one or two times, and brought gifts and tried to restore bonds with the family, but they were just too homophobe. And so you talk about the crisis having an immediate effect, and you get people who die. It's like when AIDS for me was that death of my Uncle Mark, and he still to this day has only this little plastic marker on his grave. It's just, it's probably worn out by now.
One of the strange equivalents, I'm going to just chime in here for a second.
Yeah.
Just to add
to
this.
Please.
One of the oddball equivalents that's happening now that I'm hearing is I have a friend who had an uncle who passed away in Spain. And because of social isolation, no funeral, nobody could even be there, nobody could attend. So there's going to be the aftermath of whatever effect that has on people's grief and whatnot as well.
Right. You can't mourn properly. Yeah.
People in Europe can call on grandparents' stories about World War II, when that happened all over the place.
Right.
But here we don't have that. We don't have that. We have some common memories, but memories of the Depression are gone. The World War.
Yes.
They're gone.
I'm a secondary preserver of those memories in my grandmother's stories. But there's hardly anybody left from that era, and those were tough times and different. We haven't had to fire a lot of this generation hasn't had to fire a shot. It just been forced into combat or things like that, and that's been a blessing. Growing up, war was a little more out. Well, now it's been eternal war. This is the thing where still, and I think that the sort of plague we're living through and this sort of war footing stuff are connected as well, because it's about poverty, it's about Black and brown people in other countries, and trying to it's a sort of tribal thinking of let's go raid the group down the street and take their resources, apocalypto style. It's like, so I do think that there's sort of that background in the lizard brain of some of these leaders of, let's get a T4 program solution, where if you're just dead weight, let's cut the dead weight. So I want to we've been talking a lot, and I appreciate the conversation, but I want to give anybody else who wants a chance to call in our last 10 or so minutes here.
That's perfect timing for me. I'm going to take off, but thank you.
Thanks for calling in and being part of the show and part of this moment. I really appreciate it, and it's been great to hear your stories. All right. Take care. You too. Okay, so great conversation. This is what we're trying to do, is see how everybody's doing and where we're at. What do we do next? But the line's open, so we've got this last 12 minutes. There's a bunch of stuff I can just pontificate about, but it's also great to hear from everybody. 312-841-1186 if you want to call in. I try to get out of my head a little bit in this situation, not in a bad way, just in a sense of I feel the pressure of all the economics happening, and I feel all the fear that I'm experiencing, and the sort of talking about my Uncle Mark, that history and that impact's a terrible word. The sadness it makes you feel, sort of mourning aspect, and it's awful that we have to do this again and again. I mean, it seems to me that there's got to be some federal way of like just mandating pandemic protection. If we can, and I do think that this is true, we should enshrine abortion rights into the Constitution. We should find a way to like build some protections in so that you don't have some urine stain like our current president who comes in and just pulls away all the protections. He's trying to dismantle government, but he'll pull any plug, including apparently your grandmother's respirator. So, there's got to be a way to just write that in where we don't let whoever gets into office do that. Like, why do we have to worry about the wrong guy getting the football, the nuclear football? Can't we just like, it's more complicated than that, I'm sure. Oh, one more caller. One more call. Let's do this. Hi, you're on the Charlie Chases show. Who am I talking to?
This is Amber.
Hey!
Amber Dre.
Hey, I'm glad you called in.
Yeah, I just figured, if you wanted someone to call in, I can call in.
Do it. Yeah, it's an open line.
Yeah. Another thing that I saw someone post is that it's like a slow-moving 9/11.
Interesting. So,
yeah,
yes.
And I haven't given a super lot of thought to it, but it is an interesting thought experiment. Because someone brought up that it reminds me of AIDS, and I'm like, yeah, that it sort of reminds me of AIDS crossed with 9/11.
Well, because this is, you're right. This is COVID crossed with a market crash bigger than the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah. And 2008 when, the whole fucking, and like Y2K. It's like all of this
Right.
together.
Yeah, technology, economics, recession, poverty. I think that the silver lining has been that there's this really interesting conversation about egalitarian rescue now, right? Like, so we're trying to get more equity into the system of support where, we can get gig workers on the payroll, unemployment rolls now. And that seems like a real, we've moved that goalpost in a good way. And I don't know that that's, so these conversations we've been having tonight about like, oh, it's still going to hit the South in a different way. That's totally true because, we've been able to weather it. I criticize often the Lightfoot and Pritzker administrations, but also really think they've been a light in this country and in terms of leadership. And I don't think you're going to get sort of that.
I'm proud to live in Illinois right now.
Yeah, totally, right?
Our fucking,
Chicago's got it going on. Yeah.
People are doing jobs,
Right? Yeah, I love watching Cuomo talk. I know that there's all these sort of cross issues, but yet the point being, though, that you don't have this sort of, it's a different sort of leadership approach in the South. There's a different culture of how the government protects its citizens, what that means in that cultural context. So it's a shift, and I think that you're going to see, like, New Orleans is a good case study of what's going to happen in the South, right? Because Mardi Gras turned it into the open reactor of Chernobyl, and you've got that reactor burning down in New Orleans still, where it's like, how bad is it going to be? And I think of Katrina immediately. I'm like, oh shit, it's going to be that bad, like COVID style. I don't know. Well, how are you affected by this? Like, have you been? How are you doing?
He's immunocompromised.
Okay.
So
it's
really important for us to not come in contact with anyone who may have it. But it's also sort of like we're just trying to live our lives. Like, we can't fucking just live in a bubble or whatever.
Right.
So,
I know. Stanley, I've seen on a lot of respiratory support over the years.
Yes. When he was in the hospital for his liver transplant, he was on a, what did they call it? It's like he had a tube to help him breathe. Right. It's called something, I can't think of it right now.
Intubation? He wasn't intubated.
Yeah, intubated.
Okay.
Yes, he was intubated for 5 weeks.
Wow.
Wow. 15 times longer than...
Yeah, I know. There's some damage that happens from it. Yeah.
And so he basically, lost all function of his, mouth and throat, and he never, developed those muscles.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that he doesn't eat normal foods, and he doesn't.
Right. Got it.
He understands things probably at a 2-year-old level.
Okay.
He's 4.
Okay.
But he probably understands things at about a 2-year-old level, but he's growing every day, and his mind is fine. I mean, his mind has some issues too, but
right.
it's come back, and it's definitely growing again, and like learning things and stuff.
So what's your, as somebody who's living with somebody with special needs like that,
Right.
how are you feeling in terms of safety, where you're at? Like, you feel like it's good, you're in a good place?
Yeah, I mean, out in the suburbs, it's a lot easier to avoid people.
Right.
Like, we just lived in New York like 6 months ago.
Right.
And I can't imagine being there at this time. And I love all my New York friends, and my heart is going out to them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also like, thank fucking God I'm not in New York right now.
Right. Well, your personal situation would have been drastically affected.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. And I pray. I'm not religious at all. I think of you often, New York, because I'm like, I see you. The pandemic started there. Well, not started there, but it's really sort of reached a peak there.
It's a social disease, and so
yes, right.
The more people are in a concentrated area, the more people are going to get it. But then certain people love to use that as a way to politicize, like, why certain people are getting it. Oh, guess what? They're getting it because they're fucking New York City, and they're a bunch of
godless liberals. Yeah. It's like thanks for the human treatment there. Yeah, that was another topic.
Real Christian of you.
Right. Yeah, those Christian values shining through. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you guys are doing well, and I think
I hope you're doing well too. I know I saw that you're struggling with
and nothing that everybody else isn't going through. I mean, that's who cares about it's like this. You do the best you can, and you're trying to I just want to make rent, and I want to agitate for others who are out there who I know don't have options, and I think that's it breaks my heart because I've been in that situation before, and I can't imagine doing it with a family going through an eviction, where you don't have other safety nets, and you're looking to your community, and your community may or may not be responsive. I live in a part of Chicago where there's a lot of community response, there's a lot of support systems, but just not always the case. On that note, I'm going to wrap up the show, but thanks for calling in.
It was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, to you too.
Are you doing this weekly now? Saturday?
Initially I thought, well, we don't know how long shutdown is, so I thought I'd do it for a couple Saturdays, and now I'm like, let's just do it every Saturday night. Let's hear what folks are feeling. And
I'm not doing anything else, man.
And so much of we're all just at home, so I think calling in and processing this a little bit, I think it helps to hear other people's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will tune in next week.
I look forward to it. I look forward to maybe talking with you again too then. But stay safe, and we'll do this later. Bye. Look at this. We're doing the show. It's already 58 minutes and 30 seconds in. Got off to a rocky start this time. Facebook interface. But, we're going to be doing this through the shutdown. Or, I call it the shutdown or shelter-in-place rule. As long as we're stuck at home, Charlie Chaser will be here. Being not funny. That was the original idea. Again, was Charlie Chaser was the comedian who was decidedly unfunny. There's nothing funny about this pandemic. There's nothing funny what's happening to us right now. We're all doing it. We're all going through it. And, I know I feel a little better knowing I can sit down with y'all on Saturday night and talk it out. Sometimes have a few laughs. So I'm going to dedicate this episode to my Uncle Mark. We'll talk about him more next week, but Mark Workman, never forget you. And never forget you all for calling in. I appreciate it. Be well. We're going to sign out the second episode of the Charlie Chaser Show. See you next week.